I am capable of not just surviving life, but of living life. Circumstances and people are no longer my higher power, but Jesus is, God Most High. I have peace and joy, knowing I am no longer in bondage to the past or worried about the future. I am free to live in the moment, which is all I have anyway. The past is history, the future is a mystery, but life is a gift, which is why it's the present. God has made me alive again, and I am so thankful that He has. I would like to close with the entire version of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as He did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that He will make all things right if I surrender to His will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with Him forever in the next. Amen.
Wow. You know, I heard something not long ago that the only way to win, to really win in God's economy, is to surrender. The way we want to surrender is like this. We want to, give God our lives. We want to give Him whatever, the key to our lives, We want to do it this way, but we keep pulling it back. It's like the problem with a living sacrifice. It keeps crawling off the altar. The way you have to give to God, the way you have to let go and let God is this way. You have to totally turn around and you have to totally surrender it to God. Craig Branson had the privilege, right before Will died, the husband that Nancy spoke of, right before he died, God allowed Craig to lead him to the Lord. But it was when Nancy turned loose of it, when she was no longer obsessed, when she didn't see that was her job, that God saw fit to bring Will to Himself. Let's have a word of prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we ask now that the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts would be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Let me get my keys before I forget them. God has it anyway. Technology, isn't it? Isn't this wonderful? There we go. As I said before, there are going to be 5 points that we're going to look at this morning. The title of the sermon is Power for the Powerless. I think that you can understand what Nancy was saying about being powerless over people, places, and things. A good day for me is when I don't have amoeba dysentery. If you've ever had amoeba dysentery, you realize how little control you have over anything in your life. When we had it down in Ecuador, the prayer was, Mátame or sántame, but no dejame en esta condición. Heal me or kill me, Lord, but don't leave me like this. And there's so many things that we think we have power and control over, and the reality is we have no control and no power over. We do have a wonderful program here at Old Cutler Presbyterian Church. God in His grace allowed Russell Spatz and Chuck Dix and myself to get this started, and it's called Alive Again. If you haven't checked it out, you might want to check it out. It's a ministry of recovery. It's the 12 steps of recovery with a biblical foundation. And the very first step of recovery is to admit that you're powerless over your addiction. And you know what? All of us are addicted to some form of sin. And we just discovered this morning Charles is a kleptomaniac. He didn't even know that. But actually, all of us are addicted to something. The Apostle Paul had a very serious addiction. I mean, it was a really very, very serious addiction. He was addicted to killing people that disagreed with him, and he liked it. And so when Paul writes, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of salvation, and he's talking about being delivered from the addiction of being intolerant to others. Well, Paul writes here in Romans, and this really is the very foundation of what we're here biblically all about. Here's why we're here. Because we're not ashamed of the gospel. For it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and then to the Gentile. Did I get that right, Russell? The first point is the promised power of God. Real peace, ultimate peace, is found only through the gospel, through the power of the gospel of God, and that is of all gifts the most prized. I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of salvation to everyone who believes. And you know, the only way we can hold on to our faith is to give it away. You have to give it away to hold on to it. I just picked up my 7th year medallion. I usually introduce myself as Woody. I'm a great recovering alcoholic. I just picked up my 7 years of sobriety medallion at Alcoholics Anonymous. And the truth is, 8 years ago, my wife had a drinking problem. She had a problem with my drinking. And then Walford Thompson developed a drinking problem. He had a problem with my drinking. Then Mike Cadden, my pastor at the time, he had that same problem. He had a drinking problem. He had a problem with my drinking. Finally, I thought, well, maybe I should go check out Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did. Well, while I was there, I ran into somebody by the name of Russell Spatz. Many of you know him. And so the first time that Russell and I sat down and met, as him being my sponsor in AA, he said, so what do you tell me about yourself? So I went on and on and on again, and after about 5 minutes, the hand goes up. He later told me he listened about 15 seconds of the BS that I had, that he had heard all that stuff. And he looked at me very intently. He said, so Woody, he said, do you know what your problem is? I said, I know just enough to know that I'm clueless. I really don't know what my problem is. All I know is I can't stop drinking. And I could tell by the way he looked at me that he knew. So I said, so what is my problem? He said, your problem is so simple, it's so easy. He said, your problem is just this. You're ashamed to be an alcoholic. Shame's a terrible thing. Horrible, terrible thing. I looked at him and I said, well, of course I'm ashamed to be an alcoholic. I'm an ordained Presbyterian minister. I'm a graduate of Reformed Theological Seminary. I have a doctorate. I'm a missionary. Of course I'm ashamed. And he said, well, there is some shame in being drunk. He said, but there's no shame in being an alcoholic because that is what God has allowed you to be. That's the thorn that God has allowed you to carry around so that you have to depend on Him. And he said, if you want to be able to stop drinking, you're going to have to give God thanks that you're an alcoholic. And you're going to have to stop being ashamed of the fact. And you're going to have to be able to tell people, I'm Woody, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. I said, this guy's from Pluto. I said, you mean I got to go to AA meetings and say, I'm Woody, I'm grateful to be an alcoholic? He said, that's a start. I did that for several times, and finally I began to sort of believe it a little bit. Well, today I have no problem in telling people that I'm Woody and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. It's the most incredible thing to turn things over to God and let God be the one that delivers it. And I can say with great confidence today, I am not ashamed